have some unfortunate updates from the Maui fires. Officials updated the death toll to 96 lives lost at the time of this recording, making it the deadliest wildfire in modern United States history. Officials say 1,000 people are still missing. President Joe Biden was asked about the devastation while near his beach home in Delaware. He had this to say. Let's watch.
Talk about the Hawaii response, Mr. President?
Biden's comments outraged some on the internet. Monica Crowley, a former Trump assistant secretary for public affairs at the Treasury, tweeted, "Biden doesn't give an F about the suffering people of Maui, or the suffering people of East Palestine, Ohio, or the suffering people in border towns, or the suffering of people anywhere in America." Last week, Biden declared a major disaster on Maui, pledging that the federal response will ensure that, quote, anyone who's lost a loved one or whose home has been damaged or destroyed is going to get help immediately.
Yeah, people really were asking the question, this is not a toughie. This is not a complicated foreign policy question. It's not really even a gotcha. It's just, do you have anything to say about this kind of historic devastation that's happened to Americans in Maui? And, the no comment, a comment he's given apparently on a couple of times when asked about Maui, does seem a little off, a little heartless.
Well, sure, it doesn't call for a lot of in-the-moment, deep-level thinking.
No.
You just say it's terrible and we will do everything we can to help rebuild homes or get resources for people who need them and mourn the deceased. What else do you need to say?
Well, it turns out that several people are not exactly covered in glory when it comes to how they've been addressing this particular tragedy. The New York Times went viral in a bad way over the weekend after it chose to focus its coverage of the Maui fire on a particular resident who shifted through the ashes of her burnt down home looking for a Rolex that she was given by her parents upon graduating college. Some people thought that focus was particularly heartless, given that there had been a loss of life. People were tweeting things like, I'm so glad you found your expensive watch as you were shifting through the ashes of our neighbors and loved ones, that was your priority when people are still looking for dead bodies. Scathing criticism of that choice. I mean, what do you make of that? Do you think that's unfair to the New York Times? I mean,
I did not see. Did they wrote an article about it?
Yes, there was an article.
I saw the tweet about it. I'm seeing a lot of tweets about people being really mad about it. That's fine. I mean, there's always recovered pet stories during disasters. I mean, obviously, if that was like a disproportionate amount of their coverage, I guess that's a weird choice, but I don't have any problem with it.
I do feel like most of the time people are focused on the kind of sentimental things that you lose in the context of all
it sounded like this was sentimental to the person.
Sure. To some folks, it felt like a continuation, or a reflection rather, of the interest of an elite paper. I mean, people like, our former co-host Batya speak about how so many of the people who fill newsrooms are from affluent backgrounds themselves and may or may not be attracted to stories that resonate with them and their personal experiences. I think to the common eye, a story about losing a Rolex in a fire, of all the people who've lost their homes in that community, I think the idea is, well, if you can afford a Rolex or if your parents can afford to get you a Rolex as a gift, the harms that you suffered, despite, it's horrible for everyone to lose a home, but the harms that you've suffered are going to be so much less than people who have those needs
I think it was
maybe
that it's because it's a Rolex. People are reaching that conclusion. It seems like it was a sentimental. I mean, it is damaged. It doesn't. I don't think she was looking to recover the money from it or something, right? It was just it meant something. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. Well, another point of controversy as people have been trying to process the tragedy of this story, it's raised some interesting concerns that people local to Maui and to Hawaii, generally speaking, have been raising a long time about the extent to which there's been these land grabs by very wealthy people, whether or not some of the anti-conservation choices that have been made in favor of profit have led to the fire itself, the climate change, drying out of the environment, building of things, roads and construction that made it easier for the fire to spread in a way that was completely unprecedented on the island. And coming into focus in the middle of all of that has been this focus on Oprah Winfrey, who came out supportive, wanting to be helpful in the wake of the fire, but in doing so, announced that she had, I think, thousands of acres of land in Maui, which raised the question, why are there so many people who are not Native Hawaiian who are able to buy up so much land when the local population has been pushed to the margins? It's very expensive to live in Hawaii. So much has to be imported to the island, and because of tourism, it can make it very difficult for people who are Native to live there, to ever buy land there, to own homes there, especially when people with enormous means have bought up so much of these islands for their personal recreation. So, do we care more about Oprah offering a humanitarian helping hand here, or is this an argument that she and people like her who have bought up so much of this land shouldn't have been there in the first place?
I see. Is this something lefties were very mad about online?
No, a lot of people. I think mostly I saw Native Hawaiians articulating frustration about it because there was a lot of devastation. Apparently Maui, I didn't know this, but is home to a lot of historical sites in Hawaii. I believe where there's a large, I want to say banyan tree. I'm not a botanist, so I don't want to misstate, but there's apparently one of the oldest trees in perhaps the country, an 1876 exotic banyan tree that's planted near what was a major hub for the then Kingdom of Hawaii. So the palace architecture was lost. The banyan tree was burnt down, although they're hopeful that it's still alive, and even though it's desiccated looking and black and burnt, that it will survive. It's huge when you see it in the pictures, 60 feet high, wider than the building itself. Really, Sure. Iconic and meaningful to a people who feel like because of U.S. imperialism, their history has largely been brushed to the side, and their rights as natives on that land for much longer than people like Oprah Winfrey have been marginalized. And this fire, and who were the winners and losers in this fire, seems to be highlighting a lot of struggles that Native Hawaiians have been dealing with for a long time.
Well, it's a very sad story, and we wish the devastation to be constrained as much as possible, and that the people get whatever resources they need. It's I just turned on the news a couple times over the weekend, and I didn't see it being covered very much. So I don't know what that's
It's kind of interesting. We remember recently, and I think it was summer of 2020, when all of the California wildfires were so devastating. And then, of course, this past summer, we all experienced
when the Canadian wildfires sent some smoke toward this city and policymakers had to breathe it in, you had a very different sort of news cycle.
So, and Californians were complaining, saying, now all of a sudden the East Coast cares about wildfires now that you're experiencing it. So maybe this is a similar phenomenon where because Hawaii is so far away that it's easy to ignore.
Well, we'll have more Rising right after this, and we'll keep following what's going on in Maui. Stay with us.